Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, August 14th, 2014. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, home mead maker Tim Leber shares his experiment comparing a mead from boiled must against a mead from must that has not been boiled. Will it make a difference? Will we be able to pick which is which? Stay tuned. If you're new to home brewing and would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. On Twitter, you can find me. My username is Basic Brewing, all one word. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/basicbrewing.james. And our show page on Facebook is at facebook.com/basicbrewing. We're on the Google Plus, too. Thanks to everybody clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site. You know how it works. Whenever you want to shop on Amazon.com, don't go to Amazon.com first. Go to our website first, basicbrewing.com. Click on our ad. That will take you to Amazon, and you will be helping us to support this show. We also have associate links for Brew Your Own magazine and the American Homebrewers Association on our site as well. You can find our Basic Brewing iPhone app on iTunes, our Android app on Amazon.com. We're on the BlackBerry podcast directory. We're on the Stitcher app. We're on the Windows phone directory. We have a Windows app. We are everywhere. Check out our brewer's logbook at basicbrewingshop.com. In the front is a blank calendar that you can use to track your fermentations and plan your brews, so that even though it is August, you have 12 months of calendarage, and there is room in the back to log the details of up to 50 batches of brew. If you want to put a tip in our tip jar, some coinage in our guitar case, you can go to basicbrewing.com/support. Thanks to everybody who's done so already. Protect your precious beer with one of our growler bags. Check those out at basicbrewingshop.com. And for a limited time, you can get a free Basic Brewing bottle opener with the purchase of any of our DVD combos. Quite the deal. I got mixed response from this past week's show featuring Chris Colby's method of shedding pounds while not shedding beer. So let's start on the negative side of the fence. Rob writes in with this: I love your podcast and listen all the time, and have been through the archives for lots of info. That doesn't sound very negative. And but this last show, weight loss, I tried to listen, but was not what I came for. I came to hear about beer and brewing beer. Well, there you go. Fair enough, Rob. You'll be glad to know that we are back on the practical brewing stuff on this show and the upcoming ones. I like to deviate every now and then, just as we did on the Flip Side episode last year with my friend Alan and his trials and tribulations, but I know that the majority of you probably want to stick to brewing and not the lifestyle type stuff. So I appreciate the feedback. Especially, it was a little negative, positive mixture there. Then there is this from Paul. Paul says, I just finished listening to the podcast and really found it interesting. I'm 48 now and recently got the same news from a blood test. The good doctor told me I'm borderline diabetic and my cholesterol was really getting up there. Then he starts telling me all the things I have to give up, and my first question was, what about my beer? Paul says, so I cut out all the late-night snacks of potato chips, cheese, and sugary things and basically just started paying attention to what I was eating. I also started doing one fast day per week. None of this was to lose weight. It was just to get my bloods in order, but I've lost weight anyway, down from 83 kilograms to 77, and feeling great. And importantly, still enjoying those beers. Only 5 or so a week, but loving each one, plus a little red wine with dinner, purely for the antioxidants, you understand. Then Joey in Riverside, California weighs in with this, so to speak. Just wanted to write in to suggest a website that I've used in my own weight loss progress, the Hacker's Diet Online. You can Google Hacker's Diet to find that. This is a free website and book developed by John Walker, developer of AutoCAD. You weigh yourself every day and enter the weight into the website. The website then statistically averages your weight fluctuations and calculates your statistically adjusted weight loss trend along with your calorie excess or deficit. I've used MyFitnessPal to count my calories and then Hacker's Diet to check that. I'm meeting my goals. It's been nice to know that the 30 pounds that I've lost so far is 30 pounds of fat, not 30 pounds of water weight. Well, congratulations, Joey and Paul. We have a sponsor this week. What could be better than sampling among more than 3,000 beers from over 700 breweries in over 3 days? How about doing it for free? This year, the American Homebrewers Association wants to send you and a guest on a free trip to the 2014 Great American Beer Festival in Denver, Colorado. Entering the drawing is as easy as becoming an AHA member. Join or renew during the month of August, and you will be eligible to win a heck of a trip. Visit homebrewersassociation.org for details on how to enter. That sounds like a good deal. Okay, let's get back in time once again to a hotel room in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where we had come to attend the National Homebrewers Conference. We had met before with Tim Leber at a previous conference for another interesting experiment on mead in the past, and I was really looking forward to this one. As a bonus, after the experiment, stay tuned for a tasting and discussion about Tim's incredible banana pineapple melomel. We are here in the Grand Rapids headquarters of Basic Brewing Radio. And joining us is Tim Leber, who has brought some interesting meads and an experiment.
I'm Tim Leber, Seattle, Washington.
And we have other guests.
Andy Sparks.
Norm Kwasinski, homebrewer from Washington.
Steve Wilkes, homebrewer from Fayetteville, Arkansas.
Now, we met together last year in a similar environment. And you
2 years ago.
Was it 2 years ago?
Seattle.
Holy smokes. Yeah. These all run together after a while for some reason. I don't know why. But it was a fun experiment, and that one was based on fruit, right?
Fruit, primary or secondary.
Right.
And we determined that secondary was better from an overall preference point of view.
But they were all tasty. So I'm excited about this time. And you have chosen another aspect of mead making to address.
Yeah, I'm a data guy, so I like to have numbers, but we all have these assumptions. So this one is boil or no boil for the must. It's a very controversial concept in mead making, whether or not you want to boil or not boil. So I set up this experiment where I made a 5-gallon batch of must, all with the same honey, and I took 2.5 gallons and put it in a carboy, and I took the other 2.5 gallons, put it in a pot, and boiled it for 30 minutes, and followed this recommended procedure where you skim the foam and everything, let it cool completely, put it into another carboy, and brought it back to exactly 2.5 gallons. So I had exactly the same amount, the exact same starting, and then let them ferment. Put the same yeast in both of them, gave staggered nutrient additions, one right after the other, degassed them exactly the same. They live side by side through the entire fermentation process. So the only difference is one of the musts was boiled and one was not. And then we've tasted these out. I brought them to a home brew club meeting. My beer renegades of Everett, Washington, they're very patient with me. They let me bring in meads and run these experiments on them. And everybody tasted. And the results were fairly conclusive. Actually, a complete surprise to me because I thought that was going to be a fairly subtle difference, and it was very conclusive.
No spoilers, because we haven't tasted yet. So what is the justification for each school of thought?
Okay, the boiling, the idea is honey's an agricultural product. Bees are not exactly really, really clean animals. So pollen and, bacteria and all kinds of things can be in the honey. But honey, of course, is very hygroscopic. The sugar just sucks the water out of any cells that might be there. So it's fairly sanitary. But when you dilute it back, suddenly any of the wild yeast or bacteria that are in there have a chance to get started and get going. So the idea is you boil the must, so you sanitize it. And then it's safe for you to add your yeast. And this is opposed to adding sulfites or something else, which a lot of people don't like. This is an old school method. If you read Papazian's books, he has a little mead making section in the back where he recommends boiling. And a lot of old school mead makers like it. The newer mead makers don't do this. Like I think Ken Schramm talked on your podcast in January about not heating his at all. I'm a big believer in no heat. I believe that if when you heat and you boil the honey, you lose a lot of the delicate aromatics. Because, if you have a big pot of something boiling and it smells good, that's good smell that's not going to be in your finished product. So I've advocated no boil mead for a long time. I did boil once. Careful listeners might remember my disaster story that appeared on your show about boiling over honey on my future sister-in-law's stove. Yeah, it was a disaster. So I've always done this, but it's very controversial. You go online on a mead forum or like the Facebook mead book group, and someone says, should you boil it immediately? There's 20 people, never boil. Another 20 people, always boil. So it's very controversial. So I thought, well, I'm a numbers guy. I'm a data analyst for a living. Let's actually do this experiment and see if there's a definitive difference. Because if it's a difference that makes no difference, then who cares? But if it does make a difference, then I personally am on a much more solid footing, and everybody out there who listens knows which way is better and why. So I've conducted, this is why I did what I did. And I've got a whole host of these that I'm going to do at some point.
That's awesome. I think, I don't remember if I've ever boiled a mead, but I certainly have heated the must in order to integrate the honey in with the water. Steve, are you a boiler?
I used to be, but I lanced it. I
just toss them out there.
No, the first couple of meads I made many years ago, now maybe 20 years ago, I did boil. And just because of reading Charlie's book, and it's like, okay, that's how you do it. And then I became comfortable just heating it. I was really scared of infection, but now that I've learned and learned and learned, so now when I do make a mead, I don't boil. So the evolution of my inadequate mead making.
Norm, which side of the fence are you on?
Once I heard that I didn't have to boil, I don't boil now. And you incorporate with the wine whip, I don't even heat it, so.
Well, it's extra work and extra energy. And Andy?
Yeah, I got started the same way. I remember, as a early home brewer, I found the chapter in the back of Papazian's book about mead and how it was so ancient. And, of course, I immediately decided I had to make a batch of mead. And so I followed the recipes in there. And I've made a couple since then that were just basically pasteurized, hold at 185 degrees. But, I'm not a big mead maker. I concentrate on beer, so it's not my passion.
And I honestly can't remember if I've ever boiled, but the first couple of meads I made were from your kit, from your homebrew shop that you sold at that time. Do you remember what the instructions told you to do? Because I would have followed the instructions.
I'm sure you would have.
Calling you on the phone to make sure that I was doing things right.
Yeah, I honestly can't recall. We used to have a mead kit on the shelf, and when we had a local supplier of honey that we could get fairly regularly, and that dried up, so we kind of can't stop carrying that. And I honestly don't remember the specifications. I assume it was a boil recipe because it was a long time ago, so it would have probably been patterned after Charlie's recipe.
I remember, but they turned out well. So I'm really interested in tasting these. Now, again, the reason that you added water to the one that had been boiled was to bring it up to the same volume and the same starting gravity, right? Just to replace the steam that had left the kettle.
Right. That was it. So I was apples to apples as exact as I possibly could. And they're right in there. I mean, I'm not going to reveal the data too much, but they're they were the exact same volume when they went to fermentation. So, and since they started from the same must, that makes everything easier. But I don't boil because I don't like the extra dishes.
Yeah, that's true. Now, what kind of honey did you get?
This is wildflower honey. I bought at one of the local homebrew shops. I have a lot of kind of more delicate, nice, varietal honeys that I use for other meads. But I thought, well, this is going to be I'm going to boil the silly thing. I don't want to put really expensive honey into that pot. So I just bought 15 pounds of wildflower honey, and the advantage there was that they sell their honey out of a drum. So it all came out of the same drum at the same time. So I know exactly how much. It was a 15-pound honey in a 5-gallon batch. So it all came out of the exact same drum. So that, again, it minimized another variable. Excellent. Just to the best of my ability, the only variable is the experimental variable.
Excellent. And it's a good note to take if you're designing homebrew experiments. Is there anything else that we need to know before we go into the tasting portion of the proceedings?
I don't think so. I mean, they were fermented on 71B, Lavlin, simply because it's a dry yeast and it's pretty universal. And I just put a sachet in each one, but they were the same lot number, bought at the same time at the same store. Again, minimizing variables. I spent about 5 minutes going through the bin to get 2 packets with the same lot number. But I use carbon filter Seattle City water, so it's pretty soft, pretty neutral. Carbon filter to get all the chlorine out, because the water does taste like a swimming pool if you've become sensitive to that sort of thing. But there's not a lot of hardness or alkalinity in our water. It falls in the Cascades and ends up in the Sound, about 50 miles away. So it doesn't have much time to pick up a lot of minerals and stuff. I did use staggered nutrient additions because I've become a believer in that. Maybe the subject of an experiment later, but so it's the same blend because I make up a big jar of it and just use the same thing, so it all came out same stuff all the way across. So I think that's it.
All right. Well, we will pause. We'll turn off the recorder so we can deliberate thoughtfully, and then we will come back. All right, we're back. And this was harder than I thought it was going to be. Darn it. Last time, I think, with the fruit thing, it was fairly clear cut, but this one is a lot more difficult than what I thought it was going to be. So, who wants to go first? Maybe Steve, because otherwise he'll say what Andy said.
That's right.
So,
I thought that sample number 1 was more clear, visually more clear, and I thought that sample number 2 had more aromatics in the nose, and it seemed to have more aromatics in my mouth too. It seemed like it was just more honey-like. I mean, they're both really honey-like. Don't get me wrong, but it was just like, like eating a tablespoon of honey, more or less. And so they're both really good, though. I don't have a preference in the sense that I like this one better than the other, except to split hairs with it. If you had poured me a glass of either of these separately, I would have said, well, this is really good mead. So that's interesting. There's much less difference between the two than I would have expected. I think than all of us coming into it thought there would be. And I'm not sure that I have a preference. I would say that that sample number 2 just seems to be a little fresher honey taste to me. Sample number 1 seems to be a little more refined taste to me, meaning a little more processed. So I'm going to chalk that up to being boiled and having a little more processing done to it, and then clear it out. So that's my very uneducated guess, but that's where I'm at.
Norm?
For me, sample 1, which is the clearer of the two, is more noticeable when you smell. I smell more alcohol than honey. The second one, I smell more of the aromatics of the honey. I also prefer the second one. The mouthfeel, it just feels better on my tongue overall. The first one feels a little more harsh on my tongue. So I actually prefer the second one.
Andy?
Yeah, I thought this was a lot more difficult than I expected it to be. I was expecting one of them to be much more aromatically pleasing, and I found them to both be pretty. They both have beautiful honey notes in the aromatics. One is noticeably clearer than the other. I if I had them side by side and I was just looking at them, I would probably pick the clearer one because it's more pretty, right? And is that a good reason? Probably, obviously not. I thought the second one had a slightly better flavor, but for me, it's tough. As a matter of fact, I said to you guys earlier, I clearly this proves that I should not be a mead judge.
I don't know, because we did a blind tasting. We closed our eyes and then flipped a coin as to which would be served first and second. And so someone, me, someone else handed the closed eyes person the samples, and then we tried to identify which was which. Steve and I got them wrong, and Norm and Andy got it right. So whether that means that it's like a flip of a coin or not.
But I'm not sure that. So they got it right in terms of which sample they were drinking, but we didn't identify which sample was which in terms of boil or no boil. Right in that?
Well, we identified which sample we thought was number one and which sample we thought was number two. So, yeah.
And not a preference for one over the other.
Right, at that point. It was just trying to identify which was which. And that created some confusion in my mind, because when they were initially poured, I thought that the first one, the clearer one, had more aromatics, and that may have been, as Norm said, an alcohol kind of contributing that to an alcohol character. I don't know. So at that point, I smelled it, and it had more aromatics, and so I tasted it, and I thought that it had more of a honey character than the second one. But then, with my eyes closed, I picked the second one as having more honey character. So, that shows how your mind, can maybe play tricks on you, or it could be that they're so close together that I didn't know what I was doing. So, I'm really curious. Pull back the curtain there, Tim. What's what?
Okay, the first sample I gave you, which was the more clear of the two, is the no boil must. The more cloudy sample is the boiled must. Now, I only boiled this 30 minutes. Some recipes say as long as 2 hours. Some say as short as 5 minutes. So I hit on, most of them say around an hour. So I hit on 30 minutes as a good happy medium in that batch. So the most dramatic difference between the two of them is the appearance. These were, the boiled sample was hazier all the way along. And in fact, in an effort to even the playing field, I did use two-stage clarifier in both of them. And the no boil was pretty clear before, and it didn't get much more clear. It was already fairly brilliant. The boiled sample got a little less hazy, but never really cleared up. So, take that for what you want. If you're looking for appearance points, campers, don't boil.
Do you think that's because proteins coagulated and that are remaining suspended in the boiled one? I'm just curious. Why would there be a visual difference in your opinion?
I'm guessing it is some protein haze because it's not affected by chilling. Now, these aren't cold. I didn't have a refrigerator in my hotel room, and when I ran these by the Homebrew Club, they were not chilled either. Now, that was a month ago, and these samples were a little more green then, and the differences were a little more stand-up than they are right now, but not that much more. But it did make a difference, I think, that little, that fact that it was boiled and that protein haze. And there was quite a bit of scum skimmed off. I said very carefully earlier that I diluted them back to the same volume. The starting gravity on these was, on the no boil, was 28.6 bricks, or 1120 specific gravity. Now the boiled sample came in at 27.8 bricks, or 1117. So I'm thinking some of the sugars, were kind of stuck to the sides in a few things. And that started them on March 9th of this year. On April 26th, when I pronounced them done, The no boil had gone to 14.8 Brix, or 1023, and the boiled sample had gone down to 15 Brix, or 1026. So the no boil sample started at a higher gravity and finished at a lower gravity, just slightly, than the boiled sample did, and I attribute that to maybe some caramelization of the sugars into something a little less fermentable. Also, the apparent attenuation of the no boil sample was 80.83, and the boiled was 77.78. So, there was more attenuation in the no boil sample, which is why I think it has a little more alcohol nose to it. A little, and the boiled sample is a little softer, a little less alcoholic than the other. Now, when I ran these by the club, the overwhelming preference, there were 23 data points, and all but 6 preferred the no-boil sample. Again, I thought the differences were pretty subtle then, and they're pretty subtle now, so I'm not surprised that the room's kind of 50-50. But it was very definitive, and I was very surprised at that statement. So,
and you had them use. Talk about the way that you had them evaluated.
Okay, the evaluation was we meet at a Mason Lodge, so we've got a kitchen, so we've got nice glasses glass glasses everyone uses. So everybody got 2 glasses, and then we poured around both samples, and people started smelling, but they didn't start tasting until they got both of them. And I had made up half sheets with a big square and a big triangle on it so people could set the glasses down and keep them straight. And then I passed out a simplified score sheet that had a square and a triangle at the top, and then space for them to write. Now, after all the comments, all the preferences and the numeric preferences all came in definitively on boil, and I had 2 people. One person said they preferred the no boil, but their numeric preference was for the boiled, and another person went the other way. Because what I had them do was I totaled their scores, and I had them circle the symbol that they preferred. The numbers in the end were the same on both of those methods, but there was a couple of flip-flops. But everybody evaluated, and people were asked to make notes, but not everybody did. We have a lot of newer people in our homebrew club. We have several mead makers. We also have several people who this was the first time they'd ever seen mead. So some people were shy about writing comments. But I did an analysis of the comments, and generally what it came down to was the boiled sample was hazy. People picked up some phenolics in the boiled sample, but just a little bit. And people thought there was a better honey aroma in the no boil, and it was clearer. They both were kind of harsh, but again, I said they were finished in April. I ran this through, we meet the 3rd Thursday of the month, so 3rd Thursday in May was when we actually ran this study. And it's just barely a month later, and I think they've kind of mellowed some, but they were pretty green when we ran through. But none of them are undrinkable. I mean, it's not like, from the way people act, when you bring up this comment is, if you boil your honey, you are ruining, your mead. It's gone. Or if you, don't boil, you're running the risk of, feeding all your friends a Black Death in a bottle.
That's usually my goal.
That explains a lot.
So I've come to the position of I don't boil, but the position I've reached is it doesn't matter. There's a very slight preference among people for a no boil mead, but if boiling makes you happy, makes you feel better, do it. Just don't do it too long, and make sure everything else is, all your other ducks in a row, and it should be okay. If you are trying for competition mead, you are really trying to get up there, I would not boil, because that little bit of a knock of appearance, because when everybody could see the samples, most of you preferred the clear, pretty one. So, and they say, in cooking, you taste with your eyes. You drink with your eyes too. So if you're trying to, get good competition results from your mead, don't boil. But if you're just serving among your friends, it doesn't make any difference.
That's interesting. Yeah, there was a definite. I mean, the one thing that I pegged was clear and definite was the appearance. I mean, the no boil. The first sample was clear. Mm-hmm. Second sample was cloudy and seemed to even have a little bit of particulate matter in there.
Yeah.
And then that I think colored my preference before I shut my eyes. So, and then the difference between the two, even when I shut my eyes, was so subtle that it was almost like a coin toss.
I felt like what has turned out to be the boiled sample, the triangle sample, number 2, that when I first smelled it, I got a lot of aromatics off of it, both good and bad. I got a little bit of a Band-Aid-y kind of smell off of that, and but then I also got a lot more of that real floral honey thing. I'm very surprised that, frankly, that I didn't pick the right one, knowing the difference. But it's so interesting. But you're right, though. The no boiled sample is much more attractive. So,
I would agree with Tim. If you were going to enter competitions, I probably wouldn't boil because I mean it's cloudy. He mentioned you'd use clarifier, which should take care of that, but it's still cloudy. So, unless you're having a really dark, fruity melomel or something that's not going to matter, I wouldn't boil.
And again, you boiled for just 30 minutes. I can't imagine what boiling for 2 hours would do.
I would think that if you went much more than 30 minutes, that would make a much stronger negative impact. But really, getting it up to boiling, you're going to spend more than 5 minutes between 180 and 212 just in the heating process. That'll do your pasteurization. I thought about adding pasteurization into this as a leg, but in the end I decided it would cause too much controversy, it'd be too subtle. And looking at the difference, I don't think you would have been able to tease out that difference at all.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what the the how clear the pasteurized one, because now I'm kind of questioning, well, would the pasteurized step still set those pectins or whatever those that haze causing where we're getting the haze from, or not? I mean, and the other data point you mentioned was that it has a slightly better aromatic punch. And yeah, if you're going for competition, those are the two big things. You want to be able to have them smell it and have it look beautiful in their glass before they even taste it.
Yeah, I don't know. You talked about proteins earlier, but I don't know what the chemical composition of mead is and how much protein there actually is in honey.
I'm hoping to tease this out when I do Schramm's honey forum later at the conference. But it is interesting. I also crunched the numbers of the scores of one against the other person to person. And aroma, the median difference between them was exactly the same. But the range of scores was quite a bit higher. If you look at appearance, there's a very strong preference for the no boil. Now, I'm kind of waving a sheet. The people in the room are looking at it, but I'll send James the link to this, and everybody can go look at this data online later. But the way this chart is constructed is scores of less than 1 are a preference for the no boil, and flavor, it's fairly close, but appearance and overall impression favors the no boil sample, and the raw scores, just averages across, are higher for the no boil sample than for the boiled sample. And then again, I've just got a little pie chart here. But it's interesting. I've got a chart that shows the apparent attenuation and specific gravity. It does show very clearly that they're just slightly together, and then with the no boil being ahead in specific gravity and then being behind at the end. Again, I take these in bricks. I'm in the end too cheap to waste a whole sample jar full of mead on specific gravity, so I've learned to love bricks. But it's very interesting, the difference all the way across the board. Beforehand, I would have said, guaranteed you're going to know that difference. Now, not so much.
Well, I think, in my personal opinion, I think they're so close together flavor-wise that with the added time and energy and, as you said, maybe dishwashing that you have to do with boiling, for me, tasting and seeing the results of this experiment, I'm surely not gonna boil now. I think I may heat the water a bit to make sure that the honey integrates into the must, to make it easier to mix in and pour out. And even then, we've done a show on the latest small batch mead that we did. I heated the water to, I think, 170 degrees before I added the honey in, just again to make it easier to, not for pasteurization, but just to make it easier to integrate the honey. And I got some feedback from listeners saying, "Oh, don't heat the honey. You'll destroy the aromatics." Or you'll destroy the flavor and the aromatics. Here, especially after seeing that you boiled for 30 minutes and it didn't seem to have that much of an impact, I'm not going to be shy about doing that same method in the future.
Yeah, my process is I don't heat my honey at all, but what I do is I heat my mixing water to a kind of a lukewarm tepid, and then I use that. I put a gallon in the bottom of my carboy, put the honey on top of it, and then use the tepid water to, rinse out my honey containers, because, again, I'm cheap, and I want every speck of that honey in my mead.
Oh, yeah.
And then when the carboy is about half full, I've got a good, strong Craftsman drill from years ago, and I put the wine whip on it, and I just take it to it until it's all mixed in, because I figure at that point I'm also aerating. But I also, since I do staggered nutrient additions, and if I'm doing any other adjustments, I put that stuff in when it's about half full, so it all gets very well integrated. And then when I'll bring it up to my final volume, and then I'll stir it again. But at that point, I find it's easier to mix the honey if the carboy is about half full of honey and water.
That makes sense.
Because if you do too much, it just doesn't seem to want to integrate very well. You can get a very good vortex and get that mixed. And then I mix it one more time, and I pitch the yeast in the top of it. I usually make starters now for meads. I'm just slowly evolving my process.
And what do you use to make the starters?
I actually just I use my preferred yeast is YE sweet mead, but I use 4 ounces of light DME in water, boiled. Bring it to about 1,500 milliliters, because I find that's about, by the time I put the smack pack in the top, it'll be about to 2,000, and put it on the stir plate for 24 hours. But I use malt. I've done a lot of, this is probably another experimental. I've got 6 or 7 of these, in my head. But I read somewhere that if you want to make a starter, for mead, you're better off doing it with malt, because if you do it with honey, that trains the yeast to be lazy, and you don't have as nice a fermentation. I mean, these took off pretty quick. I mean, again, they were basically done in 1 month, but I gave them another month in secondary to kind of, do their thing. But I mean, it was 2 months, from start to finish, and we're at like 3 now, from the starting point, and it's very nice, it's very smooth. So again, more subjects for these sorts of things later. I also have photographs I took of the carboys during the process that we can probably, if people are interested, we can share, because the differences in the carboy were much more dramatic. The boiled sample was noticeably darker, a good couple of shades darker, and it was also much cloudier. You could tell these were cloudy in the glass, but in the carboy it was very, very much a difference.
Steve, you had your hand up?
Oh, I was just going to say that I thought that the boiled version was actually a little softer flavored. And that's one reason why I chose it as the no boil. I mean, I was completely flipped, but it just seemed to have a softer feel on my mouth, and so I'm wondering why that would be. I would my assumption was that the no boil would be the softer, but it seemed to be a little brighter. Maybe just a little bright. I mean, it kept more of its thing, so it was just a little more, had more presence, I suppose. And I'm not sure that I have a preference for either one. They were just different.
Yeah, I think the boiled finished higher in gravity, right? So there may be some residual sugars in there.
the boiled started at a lower gravity and finished at a higher gravity. So, the no boil sample is more alcoholic by a percentage. So I think that's why the boiled tastes softer on your tongue, because it started at roughly the same place and finished just a little scotch higher. So there's a little more residual sugar.
And Norm, you said you were able to pick out the difference between the two blind because of the mouthfeel.
Yeah, because the no boil, like Steve said, seemed to have a little softer feeling on your tongue. And that probably is because of the residual sugar.
Andy, conclusions?
Oh, I think, for me it's pretty clear that since I'm not much of a mead maker, and that if I ever was going to make a mead, it's going to be a special deal, right? It's going to be something that I want to, pay a lot of attention to. Clearly, I'm going to do the no boil method, and I'll probably use your method exactly, with the just tepid water. I'm assuming you mean like blood temperature, about 98 degrees, just so it feels warm to your fingers.
About like if you're starting yeast for bread, you just want to put your finger in and go, ah.
Yeah, typically that's like right there at around 100 degrees. And this, and it seems like such an easier process, really. So why would you make it harder if the easy way tends to even slightly make a better mead?
Yeah, I see no reason to boil. I mean, there's no justification that I can come up with based on this.
Yeah, there's no contamination or infection or anything negative in the no boil, certainly. At least in this particular batch, on this particular day, and again, with scientific experiments, you want them to be repeatable. I'd be interested if anybody out there repeats your experiment to see, and I'm sure you would be interested in the data as well.
Yes, I would. Again, as I said in the beginning, I was surprised how definitive the results were based on the very, very subtle differences. So I don't boil. I advocate no boil, but if you really want to because you're scared of the boogums, go right ahead. But my theory is when you pitch a good, healthy culture on top of all that honey and water, the yeast gets going. One of the reasons all those strains are selected is they're pretty aggressive. I did not use my normal starter method for this. I just literally opened sachets of 71B and sprinkled it on the top of each one after I'd finished stirring and aerating them, and it was done. So
there you go.
Yep.
Don't fear the boogums.
Except in Baltimore, because you never know.
I don't know what that means.
The Boogums of Baltimore. You've never read that book?
No.
It was written by Broadley Cezanne.
More mead for Steve. This has been a blast.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for participating, and especially thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
And we're back.
Again.
We are drinking a bonus mead.
This is my, I call it Hawaiian Breeze. It's a banana pineapple mellow that I made. And this was the first batch I kind of made on spec. It was just a wild idea. I've got a little book where I keep all my mead making ideas. And last time I did a tally, there were about 50. And I've gotten through about 3. So, but the idea was I wanted to do something light and tropical for summer. And it doesn't hurt to be the guy at the party with a bottle of mead and all the girls standing around. And this is a good one for that. So it's just bananas, and I used canned pineapple because that's what I could get in sufficient quantity. This was a 3-gallon batch. I went down to Costco and I got two big number 10 cans of Dole chunk pineapple, and I emptied them out. Put the chunks in the freezer. And I used the liquid that came off of it as part of my water for making the mead. And then let it ferment, and this was, I believe, 71B. I've now pretty much converted everything over to using YE sweet mead. I just like that yeast better. But in the secondary, I put, I think it was 3 pounds of bananas. And I'd gone to the store and I bought bananas, and I let them sit. and they were on the verge of attracting fruit flies and leaking. I mean, these are really good, ripe bananas, like you'd make banana bread with. So they had a lot of natural sweetness, but mostly I was looking for that aromatics. Because when bananas get black, they're very aromatic. So when I went to the secondary, I took the pineapple chunks out of the freezer, and when I make melomels, I put everything in a muslin bag because I've had to fish one too many raspberry seeds out of a racking cane. So everything goes in a boil in a bag. But I put the pineapple in there, and then I peeled the bananas and put the bananas in there. And I didn't normally with fruit I kind of chunk it up, but these I just kind of broke them up as they came out of the peels if they didn't break up on their own, and put them in. Weighted the bag down with marbles, and waited a couple of weeks so the flavor was about right. What I do is when I decide how long fruit's enough time for the fruit in the mead, I taste a piece of the fruit, and if it tastes like the mead, it's done. If I still get a distinct fruit flavor, there's still flavor to be sucked out and into the mead. But when they all taste the same, you're done. And then I just took it out and I racked it. Now this is 2 years old.
Oh, wow.
And it's, I don't know, 15% alcohol or so. So.
It's absolutely delicious.
Yeah, the banana character is just amazing. So you racked off a primary, put the fruit in the secondary, and wow. I mean, I don't know. I was saying before, I don't know if I've ever had a banana flavored beer or mead. I've had Hefeweizens that were very banana bready and because of the yeast character, but man, the nose on this is just banana, and it just tastes so wonderful.
So, Tim, when you're adding fruit, at what point do you add your pectic enzyme?
I add pectic enzyme up front before everything because I figure it's got to have a chance to get in there and do that. And I think pectic enzyme actually helps even when there's no honey, when there's no fruit. But if it's something that's particularly nasty, that's got a lot of fiber and a lot of starch, I'll add a little more when I add the fruit. But generally, I add it all up front under the theory that it's all going to be in solution. If it's got nothing to do, it's just hanging out waiting for something to come along, and then it'll clear it up. But it's nice and clear now. I use two-stage clarifier in just about everything anymore. I just like what it gives me, and I'm to the point now where I'm trying to make consistent, repeatable product. Right. I don't, as yet, harbor ambitions of being a mead maker, but I'm a professional.
I was going to say.
But I want everything nice and repeatable. That's why I'm a big fan of I weigh everything, I measure everything carefully. Mm-hmm. I'm very careful about keeping records. So yeah, this, like I said, this was a 3-gallon batch, and I made it on spec. Because basically my test batch anymore is 2.5 gallons. I don't have time to mess with a gallon batch because by the time I figure out if I like it, it's gone, and So and I like to be able to share these with people. So that's what this is.
It's like a banana liqueur almost. It's so good. I'm wanting to make banana daiquiris out of it,
Although you don't need to add any more alcohol.
No,
at
you
15%. That's
Jeez Louise.
pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's really delicious. I love the banana aroma, and it's like you're saying, it's like if you're making banana bread and you're peeling those bananas and dumping them in there, and that real kind of ripe, kind of almost sharp banana character. It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
And it doesn't taste like that Halloween candy, the little
no.
banana.
No, banana squares.
Banana squares.
Least favorite Halloween candy ever.
Yeah, a lot of times when people flavor things with banana in an alcoholic beverage, that's immediately what I taste or think of, and not this.
No, this is like well done banana bread. I mean, it's the kind of, I don't know, I'm all happy. I've run out of energy to have intelligent discussion about this. I'm just in love with this thing.
Yeah, it's I was very happy with it. Like I said, I've scaled it up to a 5-gallon batch, but I've got several spin-off ideas from this. I'm thinking banana bread mead, or the other one is I want to do bananas Foster mead.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, with a little bit of brown sugar.
Yeah. Maybe cook the bananas some and So, like I said, I've got a list of like 50 ideas. I've got way more ideas than I've got time and honey for. The problem was I was a contractor for a while, so I had a lot of jobs that didn't require my full attention. Even though you're working hourly, they don't. It's not like you've got a real job and, okay, I'm going to have to keep good at this long term. So I generated all these ideas, and I'm just barely scratching the surface of them. So I've got 4 or 5 batches of mead going at home right now that are just in various states waiting.
Well, we may beat you to the Bananas Foster mead. That's,
Maybe.
that's a show.
I'd be happy to make one and send it to you, and we could talk about it.
There you go. Well, even better. All right. Bonus content. See?
Yeah.
See the value for free that you get on this podcast?
I don't know why you guys say you take June off. Every time I see you in June, you're recording a bunch of this stuff and
working
taking
our
tours.
butts
And
off.
you're not taking it off. You're just putting it all in like a week.
Well, that's true. Like this is work right now, but thanks again, Tim.
Thank you.
Well, thanks again to Tim and Norm and Steve and Andy. Tim shared yet another delicious mead with us after that, but I left the mic off for that one. You can't work all the time, right? And by the way, I think I've forgotten to mention in all these shows with Andy that Andy is the owner of thehomebrewery.com, which is our local homebrew shop here and where this podcast was born. I'll post a link to Tim's data in the description of this episode on basicbrewingradio.com, and I'll attach it as an extra PDF on the Basic Brewing app. So if you're listening to this show on the app, go down to the extras button and push the button, and there it will be. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. You'll find our bottle openers on our shop, our Basic Brewing growler bags, also available. Protect your precious homebrew and craft beers. You take it from place to place. Check out our support link where you can throw a couple of bucks into the tip jar by subscribing financially to our podcasts. Be sure to check out our DVDs, Extract Brewing and Partial Mashing, Stepping into All Grain, Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits. You can find them all on our site, along with combo deals to save you a few bucks if you want to buy more than one DVD at a time. And you get a free bottle opener included for a limited time with any of our DVD combos. You got shirts, too. Our logbooks are on the store. Keep track of up to 50 batches of beer. You can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order them online in our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We greatly, greatly appreciate the support. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are the Bounty Hunter Code from the Files of Boba Fett and Xbox Live 12-month gold membership card. Thanks again, everybody. Remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping. We greatly appreciate your support. You can also join the American Homebrewers Association and subscribe to Brew Your Own magazine through our associate links on basicbrewing.com as well. That's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long. Rest in peace, Robin Williams.